Hi, community. A big welcome. Thank you so much for pressing play and joining me. My name is Kristen Skelton. I'm the founder of Bud Funding, and here we are all about helping you live your best sustainable life. And in today's video, we're going to be talking all about passive homes. And I have a special guest with me. I have Frank Crawford with me, who is a professional civil engineer and a certified passive house designer, and he's going to be sharing all of his knowledge with us. So let's dive right in. Frank, thank you so much for joining, and how are you doing today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's jump in. So I want to know, what is a passive house exactly?
Okay, so sometimes passive house is confused with passive solar homes. So the passive house that kind of I um, prefer is the Passive House International Standard. So it is a performance-based building standard based on building science and physics. It was been around since about 30 years. It started in Germany. It is now, there's over 3 million square feet of certified passive house buildings all over the world in all different climates. So yeah, it's a performance-based building standard, I guess is a really short version of it.
Okay. And what are the benefits of building a passive house?
Yep. So the main benefit that probably everyone knows about is that you get about an 80 or 90% reduction in kind of the space heating demand, so the amount of energy you need to heat and cool your space. But the other and more important benefit that I think is that you get a more comfortable building. So there's kind of five main principles of passive house: super insulation, air tightness, thermal bridge free, high performance windows, correctly orientated and shaded, and then mechanical ventilation. And then after you apply that, do an energy model and then build it as per the energy model. Then you are going to ensure that you have no cold spots, you have no drafts. So basically every room and every floor of your house is a very similar, comfortable temperature all year round. So you don't have to avoid your basement in the winter because it's too cold, and you don't have to avoid the upstairs in the summer because it's too hot. So it maintains a very stable, comfortable indoor temperature, indoor relative humidity, especially in drier climates, can stay in a more comfortable range. So comfort is a big one. Generally, lots of natural light. If we can, again, principle four is trying to use high performance windows and harvest that sun in the winter from the low angle, and then we use correct shading so that that sun doesn't overheat the house in the summer. So comfort is the biggest one, and then you also get resilience. So because you are using 80 or 90% less energy to heat your house, if the power goes out, say for whatever reason, a grid failure, then it's going to be a lot longer before you might be concerned about your house freezing. Like in a code minimum house, if it's minus 40 out during a winter storm and the power goes out, within like 8 hours, 12 hours, you're going to be concerned about maybe pipes freezing in your house. In a passive house, you're good for a few days. Generally, the storms don't last that long. So if the sun comes out, then your house might never freeze. So it's depending on your climate, you can rely on the sun a lot more for your heat. So that kind of gives you the resilience. The other part of that is you kind of get, I guess, resilience to energy prices. So because you're using 80 or 90% less energy, that cost of that energy becomes not irrelevant, but definitely less impactful. Like if you are still using natural gas and the price of gas doubles or the carbon tax doubles. I do have gas to my house. I live in a passive house for the past 5 years, and I only use 30 gigajoules of gas for some space heating and domestic hot water over a whole year. So if the price doubles, it might cost me another $10 a month. So it becomes not irrelevant, but definitely less of a concern. Um, yeah, so that's really kind of the main benefits: is the comfort, the energy savings, resiliency, durability. So you generally pick materials that last longer as well. So you don't have to ever do as much maintenance on your house. The lifespan of a passive house, you're designing for 50 to 100 years, as opposed to kind of our typical code minimum buildings, which kind of after 30 years might start to fall apart on you.
And then on the flip side, what are the disadvantages, or are there any?
Well, I'd say there are no disadvantages. It's passive house can become code minimum, can become the building code, and in certain places like Brussels in Belgium, it is actually code minimum. So there are no
Mm,
real downsides. Currently, in kind of Alberta's market, there is a bit of upfront capital costs increase from building to a high performance building. You just have more insulation, you have better windows, you're buying better products. So you do have higher capital costs, but that's balanced out by the lower utility costs. What I always say is no one buys a house with cash. You generally always buy it on mortgage. So you have the increase in the mortgage rate, but then you have decrease in utility bills. And what you're really wanting to look at is what is my monthly total operating cost, which is the addition of those two. And in a passive house, depending where you're building, depending on your climate, depending on how optimized the house is, your kind of monthly sum of mortgage and operating costs can be the same or less or slightly more than a code minimum house.
And so, how does the heating and cooling work in one of these homes?
Yep. So within a passive house, you are, if you're in a climate that has lots of sunny days, like Calgary, where I live, is a very sunny location, and you have an orientation so that the longer axis of the south of the house or the building generally faces to the south, so it allows you to see the sun. So about 30% of your heating can actually come from the sun, depending on your location. You also account for any internal gains, which is people and appliances and uh, equipment inside the house. You still want to minimize that because it'll help you in the winter with heating, but it could promote overheating in the summer because you can't like kick people out or turn computers off in the summer. So you still want to minimize that, but you account for it. And then whatever's left over between your energy losses through the building envelope and the ventilation is just made up by your mechanical system. So it's 80 or 90% smaller, but it can be anything. I've used just electric resistance heaters, but now I'm going to be transitioning over to a heat pump, air source heat pump, mini split system, ductless mini split system, so that I have both heating in the winter at a efficiency of about 200% or coefficient of 2, and I also get some cooling in the summer because unfortunately the climate is warming, it's not getting cooler. So how I designed my house 5 years ago was okay with no air conditioning, but unfortunately due to climate change, we are certain locations in Canada, Calgary specifically, is moving into a place where air conditioning is, at least for short periods of time, becoming more of a requirement. But that's the nice thing about the heat pump is you get the air conditioning basically for free. A heat pump is basically just an air conditioner that works in, it can be reversible. So you can either draw the heat from inside the building and release it outside, or draw the heat from outside the building and release it inside the building.
And so my next question, you kind of touched on it already, because I was curious on a new build, would it cost more for a passive home design or a standard home design of the same size, which would cost more? And so I think what you said is that right now, depending where you are, like we're in Alberta, so here the supplies would cost more, but then it would kind of equalize over time, factoring in your bills. Did you want to expand any more, or is that basically
Yeah,
the
I can
answer?
expand. So if we're talking just about smaller single family homes, then yeah,
Mhm.
in Alberta right now, the upfront capital cost is somewhere between 5 and 15% from a code minimum building. But yes, once you start looking at kind of total ownership costs or lifetime or life cycle costs of that building, then your costs will be less in a passive house compared to a code minimum building. Yeah, there's no way around it. You're putting a bigger, warmer winter jacket on your building, so the insulation, there's more of it, it costs more. You're getting higher performance windows that will last longer, triple pane instead of double pane, and a better air seal. So yes, they just cost more than windows. um, but a lot of the other things, that 5 to 15% kind of depends if you can optimize the orientation, optimize the size, make it as compact and kind of as simple as possible. That's how you can kind of drive those initial capital costs down to kind of meet whatever budget you have.
Okay, so basically, my next question was, can you build a passive house on a budget? And you're saying you can build it to meet whatever budget you have.
Yep. Yeah. But basically, you can build any building to any budget. But so yeah, you always want to come up with your budget at the beginning of the project and bring in fairly early either a certified passive house consultant or designer that can give you input on, well, input on the cost, but also input on what are your needs, what are your desires, what are your wants, what are the core uses of that building, and then they will come up with a building that can then meet your budget. But yeah, if you're building a new house, it's hard going to be less to get less than like $300,000 or $400,000 depending on the size of the house. So the other thing you can do is kind of the most cost-effective house is the one that's already built. So passive house, even though it's called passive house, it works for any buildings. And once you move up to much larger, like commercial buildings or multifamily buildings, that upfront capital cost shrinks down to like 1 to 3%. So it's much smaller because you have less exterior walls for the same amount of, or actually more interior people. But as soon as you have a multifamily, some of those walls are interior party walls, which are built the same way as they should be for code minimum, so that you don't have as much area that you're focusing on relative to the interior square footage. So yeah, but taking an existing home, that one that has maybe the interior has been renovated, the layout works for you, from a space perspective, it works. It's just not very comfortable or costs too much energy to use. Then you do what's called a deep energy retrofit, and you basically redo the envelope, putting on 6 inches of insulation, doing better windows, improving the air tightness, and then changing the mechanical system to kind of make an existing building much more comfortable. And then you can still certify it. It's called a passive house EnerFit project, but those can still be certified as well. And that's another great way to kind of reduce the upfront capital cost. You can either find land and move you can even move a building from somewhere else to your land and retrofit it there. Or you can, if you want to live urban, you just look within that urban area till you find a lot that has a house that you like, but might be like a small house that is not very comfortable. If it meets those other function needs, then you can retrofit it in site. But building new is going to be your most costly option of kind of the various ways that you can house yourself.
Okay. And once built, what are the cost savings associated with a passive house?
Yeah, so the energy efficiency and
Mhm.
the energy reduction is the main one. So you'll have that 80 to 90% reduction in your space heating, which generally makes up 60% of the whole energy pie of a single family home. But in addition to that, we try to use more energy efficient ways for domestic hot water. So we'll often use, if we go all electric, we'll often use an air source hybrid hot water tank, which can then have a COP of 3 or 300% efficient. So again, you're being more efficient than your more code minimum direct electric resistance or domestic or sorry, gas hot water tank. So you can reduce your domestic hot water loads. For lighting, we'd probably use LED lights, so you can reduce those loads a little bit, but kind of most people should have LED lights anyways, so there's not a lot of savings there. Um, but you also get savings on kind of maintenance and repairs. You're selecting more durable materials. You generally aren't using any caulking or anything on the exterior that needs to be repaired every 5 years. You can use materials that don't need to be painted every 5 to 8 years. So you can definitely save on the maintenance of that building. Also, if you include renewable energy, and you don't have to, but many passive houses stick solar panels on the roof. Once you do that, you are allowed to be a micro generator and sell some of that overproduction of the solar panels in the summer back to the grid. And if you're in the solar club, which you can join if you're with one of the smaller energy retailers, you can sell your overproduction at like 26 cents a kilowatt hour this year, but it's gone up to that, and then you're buying it back at like 6 cents in the winter. So that's an excellent way to kind of reduce your utility bills. But also because you're getting that fifth principle of passive house is that you have a mechanical ventilated building, which is generally done through an ERV or an heat recovery ventilator or energy recovery ventilator. So you're always getting continuous, filtered, balanced, fresh air into your building. So it's still early times, but there are some studies that are showing that asthma or some other problems that can be coming up with like that sick building syndrome, as long as you're having that continuous fresh air, you're having no surfaces that are cold enough that they could produce mold or any fungal growth, then there are, I guess, there are some studies that are showing that the health can improve of the occupants inside a passive house because of that continuous fresh filtered air.
So, on that note, then, can you open windows in a passive house?
Yeah. You put whatever windows you want. Well, because by code, every bedroom still has to have an operable window as a fire escape. So yeah, so you're free to open windows whenever you want. And actually, Passive House promotes the kind of natural ventilation of a house during the summer, which is where you have either windows on opposite elevations or one on opposite floors. Opposite floors are the best because then you know the cold air is going to be coming in the bottom and the hot air is going out the top. If you're on different elevations, then depending which way the wind is blowing, you're not sure which way the wind is coming in and which way the wind is going out. So natural ventilation is great. That's what I designed my house to take advantage of 5 years ago. The problem with natural ventilation is if you have a forest fire and the temperature doesn't drop below, say, 20 degrees at night, then you're not going to want to open those windows. So that's when you want to make sure that you have those airtight buildings and all the other principles and the mechanical ventilation, because that mechanical ventilation generally goes through a MERV 13 filter. So it should take out just about all of the particulate in the air. It doesn't take out all the smoke smell. It takes out majority of it. But if you have a very long forest fire season, you might want to add an activated charcoal filter to your HRV or ERV system, because that's the only way you'll get all that smell out. But the MERV 13 filter will take most of the particulate out. So you generally don't need to open the windows because the air is always fresh. It's not stuffy. It's not too humid. It's not too dry, but you're more than welcome to open them whenever you want. You also, another benefit of Passive House is because you've done all this air sealing, it's much more sound. It's also sound, the sound doesn't transfer as much. So I live kind of 2 blocks from a train line, and on the other side is 16th Avenue, which is a fairly busy street, and I don't hear any of it. So that's a nice another comfort and quiet benefit of the Passive House. If you like to wake up and hear the birds sing, just wake up and open the window.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I'll just ask you one kind of personal question, not too personal, don't worry. But what's your favorite thing about the home industry, or what's your favorite thing about your personal design, or what do you find the most interesting thing in the passive house space?
Well, the thing I love best about all passive houses is how
Mhm.
comfortable they are. Like it, people are kind of talking about smart houses or other things, but my passive house is dumb. Like it's always 20 or 21 degrees. It's always a comfortable temperature. It's always a comfortable humidity. There's always lots of natural light. It's just always there. It never changes. So it's kind of boring that way. I guess as far as the passive house kind of industry, I love how because most of us that are in it for kind of goals of helping the environment, helping people live in better buildings. So we maybe compete for jobs during the day, but in the afternoons we're always sharing information. So it's a very open community. We're always sharing, learning from other people's mistakes, because we want to make sure that like we don't have time for everyone to make the same mistakes over and over. So we're very good at sharing what we've learned from each project so that each project going forwards can be a success.
That is so great. And I think one of my favorite things is the natural light. I'm a person that I love natural light. I have lots of plants. And even working in my office, I love being surrounded by natural light. So that's an awesome feature of the passive homes. Frank, thank you so much for joining me and giving us a brief introduction of passive homes. If any of you would like to find out more, connect with Frank and his work, how can they do that?
Just look up Passive House Alberta. I'm the education community lead at Passive House Alberta, so you can send an email there, and it will get to me. Or look up Frank Crawford on LinkedIn. In Calgary, I think I'm the only one. But yeah, Passive House Alberta is kind of the best way to find me, or
Okay, and I'll
me
put
and the other people I work with.
Okay. I'll put that information in the description of this video. Frank, thank you again for joining me. I learned a lot, and I want to thank each and every one of you so much for being part of this community. And I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, definitely put them in down below, and we can answer them. And have a great day, everyone. And I will see you all again next week. Bye for now.